Many of you who've watched my channel know that I'm a big proponent of head tracking, whether it be TrackIR or Toby or anything equivalent to that. Head tracking in-game helps improve situational awareness and also improves the overall immersive experience. But the main problem with head tracking systems on the market today is that they can be very pricey for the budget-conscious gamer just looking to up the immersion factor without breaking the bank. Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V, and today I want to talk about the Beam Eye Tracker, a much more affordable solution to head tracking. The Beam Eye Tracker is a software solution to head tracking that eschews using expensive IR sensors and cumbersome wires and instead uses your webcam or smartphone to translate your head and eye movements into in-game head and camera movements. It does this by translating your eye and head movements into data that can be read by a program known as OpenTrack, software that translates that input data into an output that can be easily read by other games looking for TrackIR data as an example. Now, I know some of you Star Citizen vets may be asking, doesn't Star Citizen already have a built-in webcam and head tracking system off the shelf known as FOIP? Well, yes it does. In fact, it actually got a big update in 4.0. However, the problem with FOIP is that you cannot take the advantage of it providing head tracking, for example, outside of Star Citizen. So if you want head tracking with your webcam in another game like, say, for example, X4 or Microsoft Flight Simulator, you can't, as FOIP is only tied to Star Citizen. With the Beam Eye Tracker, however, you can take your webcam and turn it into an eye and head tracker in any other game that accepts a TrackIR head tracking output. Now, I've been using head tracking hardware for years now, so I was a bit skeptical at first that a webcam solution would offer anything close to what I'm already used to with TrackIR and Toby. But I was actually genuinely pleased to see it work actually quite well when I hooked things up. Now, the setup process is a little bit involved, but it's actually very simple overall once you understand the steps, and it's actually pretty easy to set up once you are done and dusted and ready to start playing. First, you install the Beam software and follow the instructions provided for getting your camera ready. Once Beam is installed, you will then want to install OpenTrack, which is free. After OpenTrack is installed, you want to set your input settings in OpenTrack to Eyeware Beam. Here you can also set keybinds for global shortcuts, and I would recommend you set a keybind at least for centering. This will recenter your head position, which can be great if you notice things are a bit misaligned, which can happen with any type of head tracker. And it can actually happen as well with the Beam Eye Tracker, so that button is super handy to have bound. Next, you can also set up custom profiles so that you can quickly switch different profiles on the fly. So for example, if you have a Star Citizen profile, and maybe you also have, say, a Microsoft Flight Simulator profile, you can set them up very quickly there. Once both Beam and OpenTrack are ready, you can click Start in OpenTrack to begin sending TrackIR data. You'll know it's working when you see the pink octopus moving around as you move your head around. And finally, when you're ready to send that data to Star Citizen, you simply head down to the tray icon for Beam and enable Game Extension. And then within Star Citizen, make sure you enable in the comms and FOIP and VoIP section of the settings, you set your head tracking to TrackIR. And there you go, head tracking is now enabled with your webcam or phone that you are currently using, and Star Citizen will be able to read that data as well. Now, of course, this is just a general quick startup guide for Star Citizen. If you have other games that you want to set it up, or if you even want to know how to use your phone, for example, there are guides built into the actual program itself that will give you links as well as videos that you can check out in order to learn how to set up your game to use your webcam for head and eye tracking. Now, at this point, now that we are hooked into both Star Citizen and have Beam and OpenTrack running, we can start adjusting the various settings Beam has to offer to make sure our experience is a bit smoother. Now, for my personal settings in Star Citizen, I don't generally use the eye tracking or the gaze setting unless I'm doing something very specific, such as doing training or something like that. So you will probably want to set the head tracking output to just track the head instead of the head and gaze. But I feel like some players may not like how the responsiveness handles when you're just doing one or the other, so you may want to play around with this a bit so you can kind of tweak it to taste. You will also want to maximize the yaw and pitch ranges under the game extensions settings, as this will extend the overall tracking range. But most importantly, you will want to adjust the pitch and yaw acceleration curves in OpenTrack. This will enable you to look behind you, which can be useful in a dogfight, or if you just want to have more control over how far you can look backwards, or how much range you have when you are pitching up and down without having to crank your head too much. To do this, you will want to click the mapping button in OpenTrack to open the mapping menu, and initially the page will show you the yaw acceleration curve. It's very simple. All you do is you just click on the line to actually start creating mapping points, and you would want to drag your mapping points upwards to increase the acceleration. And personally, I set my yaw curve a bit extreme, having it max out at around about 50 to 75%. This ensures that I can look backwards in-game without having to crank my neck all the way around. You can also do this asymmetrically with the asymmetric mapping setting, which adjusts the curves for the left and right yaw independently. Really handy if you find that turning your head in one direction yields more input than if you turned it the other way. This can also be adjusted accordingly for pitch and roll, as well as the X, Y, and Z coordinate offsets as well. So you can adjust it all to taste, and I recommend you definitely give it a shot there. Mess around with it, find what works best for you in Star Citizen, and of course, like I said, you can save profiles, and you can save them and load them later for other games as well. The next important settings are the filters. The filters for head tracking and gaze are for smoothing out the input signal. Less filter can make things a lot more responsive, but also a lot more jittery. The more filter introduced will end up reducing the responsiveness, but will also reduce a lot of that jitter, which can be really useful for those of you that may be a little bit more susceptible to motion sickness when you're looking at a lot of different types of motions in game that can introduce that. My recommendation is you start really hard on the filters, and then you slowly back them off until you feel like the head tracking is a lot smoother with minimal amounts of jitteriness. You just kind of have to find that sweet spot that works best for you. And those are the main settings that are the most important ones to tinker with, to taste, at least when it comes to setting things up in Star Citizen. You may have other preferences for other games. So how does this actually hold up once everything is said and done? Well, to be honest, I was actually quite impressed with the tracking capabilities after I completed the setup process and hopped right into Star Citizen. It was really eye tracking for everyone. In my testing, the beam does an admirable job of translating the data it received from the webcam into head movements in-game. Now, I tested this both with a crummy $30 webcam I bought online just to test this out. I also tested it on an old laptop webcam of mine, all the way up to my fancy studio camera, and it worked great with all the cameras. However, the tracking performance was notably affected if the camera frame rate was not the best. You can get away with lower frame rate webcams, but you will get the best bang for your buck if you have, say, a 60 FPS or higher camera. This will ensure smooth tracking and translation while in-game, but even with a lower FPS camera, it still does the trick. An additional caveat to note is having a well-lit environment will also help with the tracking as well, since a lot of webcams use auto ISO, which can lower their frame rate in low light environments, which can translate into a lot more sluggish tracking. Luckily, the beam eye tracker does have good frame interpolation, but you'll still be better off with a well-lit environment to start with. So beyond those caveats, the beam eye tracker is a fantastic piece of software for the budget-conscious gamer, and it also is great for those that travel. Now, I recently went on a business trip for my work, and I use my laptop a lot, which is a gaming laptop. However, I never play Star Citizen on it because I'm next to practically useless at flying without my head tracker. For me, it's like driving my car with one hand tied behind my back. I obviously can do it, but it just doesn't feel comfortable or right to me. Luckily, the beam eye tracker made it easy for me to actually put it on my laptop and use its webcam as a tracker, so I was able to hop in game and get some salvage work done and explore more of 4.0. So thanks to them for helping me continue to feed my Star Citizen addiction when I'm away from the studio. And now that means I can still secretly watch your takeoff and landings even when I'm not in the studio. Yes, I can take head tracking with me and still spy on you all. Now, with all that being said, do I recommend the beam eye tracker? My answer is a definitive yes. If you are a sim gamer that is operating on a tight budget, the beam eye tracker is the perfect solution. With the ability to use any webcam or smartphone, the beam eye tracker is an excellent way to get good head and eye tracking in any game without breaking the bank. And like I said, it goes beyond Star Citizen as well. Any game that can read, for example, track IR data can theoretically read all the information that Beam sends out as well. And much like how Toby has a ghost functionality, the beam eye tracker has one as well too, so it can actually project on screen where you are looking at a given moment, which is fantastic for training and of course self-improvement in games as well. Since you can record it, and with the playback you can actually see the ghost on top, so you can see where you were looking at, say during a dogfight or an FPS fight or whatever. It's really, really good for learning where your mistakes may have come from. Now, the Beam eye tracker is probably not going to replace my hardware trackers, and probably not for you as well if you use a hardware tracker on the daily. However, for me, it will be my primary tracker when I'm on the go outside the studio, say for example on a flight or just anywhere abroad where I'm not in my home studio where I can take advantage of my hardware head trackers. This also makes a perfect backup if something goes wrong with any of my other hardware trackers, such as Tobii or TrackIR, which tend to have problems every so often. For example, I may forget to actually turn on my TrackIR when I start Star Citizen, and sometimes the Tobii background services just don't start properly, or there's just a weird issue. It will probably require me to restart my PC to get it to work right, and in an emergency or in a situation where I need to record something, that's generally a no-go. So having a backup such as a webcam, which I have all the time plugged in, is perfect because I can just flip it on when I need it in an emergency. So if you are interested in picking up the Beam eye tracker yourself, there will be links in the description and the pinned comment below for you to check out. And of course, if you have additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or hop onto my Discord and leave your questions there, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can to answer those questions for you. Alright folks, that's it for me today, talking about the Beam eye tracker, the affordable head and eye tracking solution that you can use in Star Citizen or your other favorite flight sims. If you did indeed enjoy this video and found it informative, please leave a like as it really does help out the channel. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this and much more down the line, be sure to subscribe as well. Till next time, fly safe, keep those thrusters hot, and I'll see you all in the black.